Welcome to Asian Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. Our guest today is joining us via Skype from Taipei, Taiwan. Our guest is Dr. Jerome F. Keating, Associate Professor at National Taipei University, retired. He's also a very well-known political commentator based in Taiwan and also a political activist. He has long lived in Taiwan, and we welcome him here to join us today to share some of his views on some of the more recent events in Taiwan, and also looking forward to the 2016 presidential and legislative elections. Welcome to Asian Review.
Thank you, Bill. Good to be with you.
It's good to see you. Well, before we go any further, I'm going to make a little pitch for your book here, if we could get a close-up on this. And this is a really nice little book. It's called Island in the Stream. It's a great book for someone who doesn't know much about Taiwan, maybe very little, and wants to learn something fast. As the author told me, this is the kind of book someone flying from San Francisco or LA can read on a flight to Taiwan, and by the time they get there, know a lot more than they did before they took off. It's published by SMC Publishing Company in Taipei, and I think that you can find it online. So now that we got the promotional out of the way,
Okay.
let's get into it.
Okay, Bill, let me make one slight correction.
Okay.
I'm not technically a political activist. You might say I'm an advocate of democracy. Technically, foreigners are not supposed to be active in things. So we advocate. Just so we have the record straight here.
Oh, okay. All right. Got it. That's a good point. Point well taken. Well, there's been so much of vital importance that's happened in Taiwan in just the last year. I mean, looking back, just a little over a year ago, there was the Sunflower Movement. 1 year later, how do you look back on that?
I think the Sunflower Movement was a very pivotal point. It was a coming of age of a generation. In some ways, like the Wild Lily movement was back in around 1990. It was not just a coming of age, but call it a demonstration or really getting into it. And it was very crucial in stalling or slowing down what we could say was Ma Ying-jeou's push to what some feel unify Taiwan or link Taiwan and China immeasurably. And it, interesting, was actually helped by the legislative yuan when it was occupied. Wang Jin-ping, who is the Speaker of the House, is the only one that could clear the decks. Now, the students also went over into the executive yuan, but that wasn't his territory. And this gets us into a little bit of the political feud between Wang and Ma, even though they are in the same party. I don't know if we want to go there right now, but maybe later on, if you want to go to the presidential elections first.
Okay. Well, we certainly want to talk about that because, I mean, everybody's eyes are on that. Everybody's. I was just talking to some people in Washington today on the phone, and they're all looking at that real closely and have their ideas of how it's going to play out. Well, I mean, couldn't we say that actually the Sunflower Movement was really, it created a great opportunity for Tsai Ing-wen, didn't it?
It definitely helped her. It helped the DPP, and it also just really helped Taiwan. And I think that was in a way, the main purpose of the students was to really help Taiwan. And it was amazing the reception it got from the people. This was much different than the Hong Kong Occupy Central.
Oh, well, how's that?
Well, Hong
That's a
Kong
very interesting
occupies
comparison.
Hong Kong occupies Central, of course, blocked off the main traffic artery, and while the people supported it, they were thinking also, hey, business got to go on. You know, we got a conflict here. In Taiwan, they were in the legislative yuan, and it was surrounded by students and other participants, and people were going down there and just walking around the block to just get a feeling for what's going on. And of course, some were getting also in, and because they had to be expelled within the people occupying it. But there was tremendous support, I would say, from the people in the city, because I think they really understood what they were after. And, you know, it was slowing down the legislative process as Ying-jeou tried to ram through his linkage with China through trade and business development.
And that bill, the cross-strait trade agreement, still on ice.
Yes, still on ice. And Wang Jin-ping, he comes back into the picture, has said that he has agreed that he is, of course, Speaker of the House.
Mm-hmm.
On a side interest, you know, back in 2013, Ying-jeou had tried to get him kicked out of the party and therefore lose his seat and lose his position as Speaker in the House because he was not pushing ECFA fast enough. Mm. Wang withstood that challenge and withstood it in the courts and stayed, and now he will be Speaker until the end of the term in 2016. So, and he has agreed that they will go over everything in that pact item by item in the legislature. That was the main goal.
It seems to me that Wang Jin-ping's on the winning side of this and Ma is on the losing side.
Definitely in that regard, at least as far as this battle. Mm. You know, there are many other battles to be fought, and a thing that will come back in the back door is that by this coming Saturday, Wang Jin-ping will announce whether he will or will not be a candidate for the presidency in the KMT primary.
What's your guess?
I think he may announce that he will, but not because he necessarily feels he can win the presidency or be their selection, but it's more a strategic matter that he shows himself that he is a power broker in the party, mm-hmm. and that you have to deal with him. You cannot brush him aside. He has support, and actually right now there are only two other people that have their hats in the ring, and one of them may drop out because he doesn't have the needed signatures, and the other one, Ing-jeou, is sitting in the sidelines. He has said he is not going to run. This is getting very interesting, Bill. Mm. And the other candidate, let me get the speaker, not the speaker, but the deputy legislative speaker, Ying-jeou, has said that she doesn't see any problem that Ing-jeou being drafted, even if he doesn't get the necessary, go through the regular procedure. Now, that's very unusual for the only, right now, person who has the required signatures, and that to be in the primary says, of course, we can also draft Ing-jeou.
You know, my thinking is, and I think I picked up some of this on my recent trip to Taiwan, is that if Ing-jeou runs for the presidency and he loses, then his political career is over, because he will have had to resign the mayoral position in Xinbei, and also he will lose his currency or his viability within the party. So his political life is over. So does he really want to risk that? I mean, he's what, only 53 or something like that. I wonder, you know, you said Wang Jin-ping might strategically run for president. Would he be willing to fall on the sword for the party just to have a candidate of some, name recognition, but not really thinking he's going to win?
Wang, that would present a different type of problem. Wang would be willing to work a deal. Wang is always willing to work a deal. And he would be willing to fall on his sword. He's 73 now. He'll be, I think, 75 by the time the elections are here. So he's getting up there. I don't know if he would want to be another 4-year term as Speaker of the House. He could be looking for a good retirement package where he still would have influence in the party. But the other thing is that would the KMT would have trouble, certain factions in the party would have trouble accepting him as their candidate for the presidency. So it's a two-way, or a double-edged sword almost here.
We're using a lot of metaphors with swords here. We're going to take a break here. You're watching Asia in Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. Our guest today is Dr. Jerome F. Keating, joining us via Skype from Taipei, Taiwan. He's a long-time resident of Taiwan. He's very much in tune with the political culture there. He publishes a number of op-eds every year in the Taipei Times. And we've been talking about some of the recent events in Taiwan political history, going back 1 year to the Sunflower Movement. And we'll be right back.
Hi, Jay.
Hi, Keith.
My name's Keith Bettinger.
I knew that.
And I'm the host of ThinkTech Asia.
I knew that, too.
Here on ThinkTech.
Fabulous. You got a great show going, Keith.
Thank you very much. And for our viewers out there that are interested in ThinkTech Asia, it airs every Tuesday from 4 to 4:45. And it can be accessed online at thinktech.com.
Yeah, so what kind of guests you like?
Well, we have a number of guests from academia, from practitioners of international affairs. Sometimes we have military officials. Sometimes we have public officials on the show. And our goal, we try to talk about current issues in South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, and Central Asia, all throughout the Asian realm, in more depth than you would find in traditional mainstream.
That's the
media.
difference, isn't it?
Exactly.
That you're reaching out beyond what ordinary news media would do.
Right.
That's why we like you so much.
We're trying to provide a thinking person's perspective, an intelligent perspective on what's going on, and we're both sides of the story, or even when there's more than two sides, we try to cover every angle. And I think that's one of the big benefits that we provide here at ThinkTech. Is it's a really innovative source of educational programming for the people of Hawaii.
You're great, Keith. You are a great host. You got a great show going on. I watch it every week.
Thanks very much.
Why don't you guys watch it every week too, okay?
4:45 to 4 to 4:45 every Tuesday.
Welcome back to Asia in Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. Our guest today is Dr. Jerome F. Keating, joining us via Skype from Taipei, Taiwan. Jerome is a long-term resident of Taiwan. He's very much in tune with the political situation there. And over the last year, there have been a lot of very major events that have taken place in Taiwan, and we're taking a look back at them. Well, before the break, we're talking about Wang Jin-ping, and maybe we should talk a little bit more about him before we move on and talk about some of your more recent op-ed pieces, which have very interesting points about the KMT diaspora. But, Wang Jin-ping, he has friends everywhere. I mean, he's, unlike Ma, who doesn't seem to have many friends, Wang Jin-ping, it doesn't matter what party they belong to, or, I mean, he has just got this golden touch.
Right. He definitely works well on both sides of the aisle, and both sides accept him. He has been speaker, I think, since 1999. That's a long time. That's through the administration of Chen Shui-bian and Ying-jeou. Mm-hmm. So he's pleased, and that's also been 4 different elections. Mm. So he is that's why, I use the term in a way, wheeler-dealer, and he he knows how to work things. Some people look on him more like a Cardinal Richelieu, that he can survive no matter who is in power. But this 2016 is going to be a little more telling because, and even we will know by the end of this week whether he is going to throw his hat in the ring for the presidency or not. He may just bow out.
Right, right. Well, let's move on here. Let's talk about, you had a couple interesting op-eds in the Taipei Times recently. One was called "The KMT Diaspora Grieves for the Fatherland." And another interesting one that I read was called "The Dilemmas of the KMT Diaspora." You're really fixating on this notion about the KMT diaspora. You know, when I read that one about the KMT diaspora grieves from the fatherland, you know what it reminded me of?
Who is that?
It reminded me very much of Vietnam. And of course, Vietnam was divided into two, you know, North Vietnam and South Vietnam.
Right.
And then we had the standing government of the Republic of Vietnam, which went out of business on April 30th, 1975. But the opposition, if we want to call it that, was the National Liberation Front, who were kind of was the political organization that led the Viet Cong, the guerrillas. And of course, they work with the North Vietnamese Army and South Vietnam, but they're the ones that really carried that struggle forward. And we're more or less told that when the war was over and if Hanoi successfully won, that, you know, things would be united, everybody would be equal, etc. That didn't happen. Very few people got any kind of significant position in Hanoi. That is, very few people from the National Liberation Front. And as I read your article, your op-ed about the KMT diaspora grieves for the fatherland, that message just came ringing back to me. There's these people in Taiwan, some people call them the compradors, that are really pushing the connection between Taiwan and the mainland, hoping to get financial advantage, business advantage, perhaps some lofty position in a unified China. Is that realistic? They might get mercantile benefit, but I don't think they're going to get political benefit.
Right. It's a good observation, Bill, because I think this is where their bind is, that the KMT, you know, they always tout, part of their discourse is that we are the party of Sun Yat-sen founded. Mm-hmm. And how can you lose China and still say we are Sun Yat-sen's party? And they either almost want to be prodigal sons coming back, or I almost feel sometimes that they would like that somehow the CCP would say, okay, we will let you be the custodians of Taiwan, mm-hmm. you know, our absentee landlord or something, and you know, but we will keep the reins tight. They will be small fish in the big pond of political intrigue in China.
I thoroughly agree with you, and I've heard this argument in various forums since about 1975. Oh yeah, well, Taiwan unites. I don't say reunite because I don't think Taiwan has ever been all that united with the mainland, but let's say unite. And it unites with the mainland, and then the government in Beijing, national government will give a certain number of positions over to Taiwan compatriots. My sarcastic comment is what? Dog catcher?
Good observation. Now in this bill, sometimes I also feel the KMT is playing this discourse that they are trying to say we are the only ones that can really talk to the people in Beijing. That we go along with the 1992 consensus, and we are the only ones that can really negotiate, and it's more of a trying to claim legitimacy for their party when there is very little legitimacy for them to represent Taiwan.
Well, that's a very interesting point, and I think that in one of your op-ed pieces, I forget exactly which one it was right now, but you're sort of saying that the KMT is in a constant state of denial, that it still claims that it rules all of China, although it essentially got booted off the mainland in 1949, and it still has yet to come to the realization that we really don't have much to do with Tibet, Mongolia, the mainland, or anything outside of Taiwan. You know, and I think I'm trying to draw a deeper lesson from this, maybe a lesson about Asian culture, is, you know, I think we have to say, you know, the Japanese are still in somewhat of denial from World War II. You know, comfort women, the rape in Nanjing, and various other actions carried out by the Japanese military. I mean, I wonder if this is a feature of Asian culture, this ability to have such strongly seated denial.
Okay, well, it's I don't know if I want to simply lay it on the Asians, because I guess, you know, probably the U.S. has its own denials, and Russia certainly has a lot of denial.
There's some denial on Iraq, I give you that.
and Russian denial of, say, Keating and what they did to Poland, and you know, but let's focus just on, even though denial can be probably spread across the board, let's focus, like in China, this Chinese Communist Party is really in denial as to what Mao did, and how Mao, in a way, you know, destroyed the country for a good decade or so.
I understand exactly what you're saying. There's the whole denial of the Cultural Revolution, the total, how should we say, any discussion on the Cultural Revolution is simply a no-no, a huge no-no.
And right, that and the Great Leap Forward, you know, everyone making steel, all these that caused the famine.
Right.
Now, part of this denial may be pride, but actually part of the denial is because the CCP needs Mao to justify its position. They have become oligarchs. They are nothing with the socialist revolution. But how do they, you know, they have to keep Mao there, because almost like in Animal Farm fashion, they have kept themselves, that's their legitimacy of power. You know, so there's kind of a double play here, that the denial serves a couple of different purposes.
I see what you're saying. You have to be very careful how you manipulate these symbols like Mao. If you manipulate them one way, it could build what the CCP is always worried about preserving, which is stability. But if you manipulate them another way, it could undermine stability.
Right. Because remember one time when we were here, we were talking about that book, The Bling Dynasty. And I have the book here. I could almost flash it up there. I don't know if I want to give that a promo, but what that book is saying is that by 2025, 50% of the luxury goods of the world are going to be bought by 4% of the Chinese population. You know, that's luxury goods sales worldwide. And that's not communistic or socialistic or anything. It's oligarchy.
Good point. Hey, let's move on to the 9-1 election, because that was another huge political event that's just taken place all within the last year. Why did the DPP do so well? What's your explanation?
Okay, well, I think partly Taiwan is continually coming of age, that National Chenchi University has been running identity polls from about 1992 on. Now, 1992 was when the first time legislative yuan could be elected by the people.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a greater growing sense of being Taiwanese, and they have about 6 categories: Taiwanese with Chinese background, etc., for unification, for independence. But the figures are very clear that Taiwanese are shaking off what I would call the Stockholm syndrome effects of being under a one-party state KMT education system. And this is where the sunflowers come in. The sunflowers, you know, when they started elementary school, basically, they were just, it was the first time Ing-wen and the election of the president. So they are unlike the strawberry generation. And they have even experienced democracy all their lives. So it's kind of like, this should be democratic. So this is an increasing thing in Taiwan. And I think the people in the US, I'm talking to kind of State Department people here, this is something they need to read and be aware of. They have too long been used to the whining and dining they had under the KMT, excuse my comment here, but they have also too long listened to only the KMT discourse. And that's why I think you commented that the people in Washington are all of a sudden finally starting to wake up and say, hey, there are changes going on there. And there is this growing awareness.
Interesting. We're going to take another break here. You're watching Asia in Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. Our guest today is Dr. Jerome F. Keating. He's joining us via Skype from Taipei, Taiwan. He's a longtime resident of Taiwan and very much in tune with the political situation there. So we have been discussing a lot of the key political events that have transpired over the last year, the Sunflower Movement, the 9-1 election. We want to talk a little bit more about that after the break, and then we want to talk about the big one, which is the upcoming 2016 election for president and the legislature. So we'll be right back.
Hi, aloha. My name is Chris Leatham, and I host a show called The Economy and You. The show plays every Wednesday at noon, and on my show, I bring on guests who are interested or working in the technology space. And so I'd like you to come and watch the show and learn with me about all the sort of exciting things that we're doing in Hawaii to build and grow our economy ecosystem. So I'd like to say aloha, and I look forward to seeing you on the show. Thank you.
Aloha, my name is Paul Jackson, better known as PJ, and my local interest is in sports. I have my own sports radio show at KWAI AM 1080 that you can stream live. I also have my own website, pjsportsradio.com. We have live guests in studio, and we talk about discussions and topics that everyone wants to know locally here on the islands. We cover everything from surfing to basketball to whatever's going on locally, sports-wise. We try to do our best and cover the topics in depth as much as we can. Once again, thank you for joining PJ here on Hawaii Sports Update. Mahalo.
Welcome back to Asian Review. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. Our guest today is Dr. Jerome F. Keating, joining us from Taipei, Taiwan. We've been discussing a lot of the key political events that have taken place over the last year in Taiwan, and there's a lot of them. There have been a lot of them. Well, you know, let's talk about this 92 consensus, and then we want to get on to the election, because unfortunately, time just keeps running on here. 92 consensus, how would you explain that? Because some of our listeners, I think, probably understand that, but there might be a few that don't.
Okay, yeah, I would wonder, because it's an interesting point of how people try to work discourse. Let's start with the fact that Suu Kyi, invented the term in 2000. So 8 years after 92, this term is invented by the KMT, Suu Kyi, and I think he's in the dealing with mainland affairs then.
Mm-hmm.
Now, recently we have an interesting double comment. Ing-wen, who is president at 92, said this whole thing is nonsense. And Ying-jeou, who is now president, is saying it's the bedrock of communication. But
essentially, the 92 consensus says there's one China.
And yes, it's one China, kind of like we accept that there is one China, but this even gets us into the U.S. position on what is one China, or the world's position. But it said that there is one China, and the past Interpretation has been with each side interpreting what it is.
Good, good.
So technically, under this, the ROC, therefore, and Ma can claim, you know, we rule all, we are the rightful rulers of all China, because this is our interpretation. We have the 1947 Constitution, which gives us that right. And of course, the other side, Xi Jinping and that, are saying, well, no, you know, our interpretation is that Taiwan is a part of China. We are the rulers. We won the Civil War, and it's about time for you guys to come home.
That's a colorful way to put it. You know, I think Taiwan's constitution sort of gets it into a lot of trouble. I mean, essentially was written in, as you said, 1947 in the mainland, for the mainland, carried over to Taiwan, yes, modified in a few places. Thankfully, they got rid of the National Assembly. But it seems to me it holds up a lot of progress in Taiwan, and in essence is a source of dissension between the parties. Tsai Ing-wen, this has been one of her huge problems, hasn't it, been? How to finesse the 92 consensus. And to me, she just seems to sidestep it and say, the DPP supports the status quo, and try to leave it at that. It seems right now the KMT is really trying to push her on the 92 consensus, especially Ma. Especially
right.
Ma doesn't have anything to lose at this point.
Right.
Tsai Ing-wen's in a difficult position, but I don't know. I think she's handling it the best way she could, in my own personal view. I wonder what you think.
No, in one way, to me, she is not in that difficult of a position. If you look at the fact that, first, it is an invention 8 years after the fact, and second, the man who was president when the 92 was consensus and remained president for the next 8 years said that was nonsense. So Tsai Ing-wen is in a very good position to agree with Lee Dong-wei and Suu Kyi. This is a fabricated nonsense. Now, what the discourse is trying to do is, for the KMT, what the KMT is trying to do is to, you know, twist it to say, we're the only ones that therefore, because we are saying we technically can rule China under this, we therefore are not saying the dreaded I word, independence. And, you know, they're trying to say, whereas, and Tsai Ing-wen is dodging that. She's saying, we're not saying the dreaded I word. We are saying status quo, where we are a democracy,
Right.
a very functioning democracy, and we don't necessarily want to go home as the Xi Jinping wants us to. You know, that there's a whole different thing here. So I don't think she's in that tight a position. What Ma is pushing is a losing horse, let's say, that Ma is trying to hold to the old, you know, saying that the only thing that keeps us at bay with China is the fact that we can technically say that we never lost the war. We are ruling on our side. Okay, you control the territory, but technically we are the sons and daughters of Sun Yat-sen, etc. So I think Ma is actually in the weaker position here because he's...
Oh, I definitely agree with you. Yeah, you know, and they say, the mainland says, well, if you don't accept the 92 consensus, we'll never talk to you. But that's not true. There's lots of talking going on between the DPP and the mainland now. It's done in a kind of below the radar screen kind of way, but it's definitely going on.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll give you an example. There's a book, and I'd have to search for the title, but it was written on Cambodia by a communist who was working for the CCP there.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, if you remember, the Communist Party, Beijing, was backing the Khmer Rouge, but they were also talking to the president of Cambodia. So they're talking to both sides, or they're not opposed to that. They can deal with that. They're saying they won't talk to Ing-wen. I think the rest of the world is beginning to catch on to the fabrication here.
Yeah, I think that's true too. Our time is kind of, pilfering away here. Okay, we have, I just been informed we have 5 more minutes. Let's talk for just a minute or so about her upcoming trip to DC. Of course, this is hugely important for her. She's going to go to all the think tanks and, tell her, explain her positions and answer their questions. What's your guess on how that's going to go?
I think it's going to go much better than last time. One, I think, Tsai Ing-wen is much more, she has weathered many storms. She has much more experience. But I think also the people in Washington are beginning to realize that, let's take like the U.S. position. It's been 70 years saying uncertainty, about Taiwan. You can only play that horse for how long? 100 years? I don't know. I think, people in Washington are beginning to get wise to China's ways, and this isn't really upsetting the boat. And in my mind, Washington backed the wrong horse with Ying-jeou. They didn't really understand what was going on in Taiwan, and the sunflower movement, this last year shows that whole growing trend that I think it caught them by surprise, and they're all of a sudden, hey, maybe we better go back and re-look at everything, and it's not as bad as we seem. We will still avoid the dreaded I word,
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I mean, if you are the primary force in bringing about democratization in Taiwan, and given the fact that democratization has been so successful, it seems to me that you have to play it down the middle and not favor one side or the other. And I certainly hope that the U.S. government does that it lets the voters decide. And frankly, I hope the mainland doesn't try to interfere too much either by, offering benefits to the Taishan, the Taiwanese businessmen on the mainland, and are making threats and that sort of thing. Something that concerns me a lot, and you and I talked about it when I was in Taiwan, is the political disunity in Taiwan, the division. I find it so sad. And I've heard of so many reasons that have caused it. One is the wealth gap, which seems to be growing. The other is the party assets held by the KMT. China policy, and then some people say, and actually this was a point made to me by former Vice President Annette Lu, the backlash of democracy. I've talked to a lot of people on all sides of Taiwan politics, and when it comes to the media, they all have pretty much the same comment. It's out of control, and that it exacerbates the situation, whatever the situation might be. And it seems that also creates greater division within Taiwan society. So I don't know, when I think about disunity in Taiwan, I think of those 4 features, but I'm wondering what your take is.
Okay, yeah, I have 2 divergent thoughts almost on it. In some ways, yes, the media is exercising their freedom, which is good, and they're questioning a lot of things, but sometimes their tendency is to be a little too shallow and just go for the headline news or go for the eye catcher. So that's the bad part, is that they go for sensationalism, and then, you know, that drops out to what's the next sensational story, and they're always feeding that. But on the other side, they need, in a way, to develop a greater challenging aspect of the people in power, and they're struggling, I think, probably in their own, as to how to be true to their, you know, what they are, the fifth estate,
Right.
think it's called, and yet how to keep the news, how to get your market ratings up.
Right.
So they're going through their own learning curve. And remember,
we have about 1 minute left here.
okay, they're only, you know, just about, you know, 20 years or so out from martial law or from free elections. So they're learning as well. So they feed it, but it's the people, the identity of the power parties, and I think primarily this identity thing with the KMT. When you've got Hao Pei-sun going to China and singing anti-Japanese war songs with the CCP, what's he thinking about as far as Taiwan and China relations? The old guard of the KMT.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. Unfortunately, it happened again. We're out of time. Jerome, thank you very much for joining us today. It was really great to be able to have this interview with you. I know there's a lot more we could talk about, but unfortunately, time's not on our side. I'd like to thank you for watching today. I hope you enjoyed the show. Next week, we'll see you again right here. And our guest at that time is the president of the PREL, which does a lot of educational work in the Pacific Islands. We'll see you then.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
I'm Jay Fidel. This is ThinkTech Week. First, why don't you consider coming to our downtown forum on May 1st in Lani Kea. This time we're covering public spaces in Hawaii, how to plan, design, fund, build, manage, maintain, and preserve them. How important are they to our urban and civic experience? How they help us realize the new openness we've been hoping for in our society in Hawaii. Fritz Johnson, an architect. David Miller, an architect with Architects Hawaii. Glenn Miura, an architect with Glenn Miura Architects. Ian Sanderson, a lawyer with Carl Smith Ball. Carol Taylor, a lawyer with Taylor, Liang and Chi. Brittany Ta'amu Miyashiro, the Box Jelly. Scott Wilson, the American Institute of Architects. Sponsored by Hawaii Business Magazine. Sign up today on thinktechhawaii.com. I hope you're watching our ThinkTech Daily News with Donna Blanchard. She reports to us every day on news of interest to Hawaii. Check it out every day on ThinkTech and on youtube.com/ThinkTechHawaii. You might also want to check out our Radar News with Sachi Slomov. Sachi's great, and you'll see what I mean the first time you watch her. See Hawaii style in Radar News. Check it out on ThinkTech and youtube.com/ThinkTechHawaii. ThinkTech broadcasts live noon to 5 every weekday and sometimes more. Go to the home drop-down on thinktechhawaii.com for our regular daily calendar. You'll be glad you did. Or sign up for our daily email advisories at the bottom of our homepage and get our advisories every day. Great content, relevant to Hawaii on ThinkTech. But there's more. We broadcast our earlier shows all night long, so you can always watch ThinkTech on thinktechhawaii.com. And you can always see our videos on demand on youtube.com. ThinkTech, going global, coming to a continent near you. And yes, we have Twitter. Have questions, comments, or thoughts about our subjects? Tweet us at ThinkTech Hi, H-I. Our hosts have instant access to your tweets and your questions, comments, and thoughts, and will respond to you and ask their guests to respond to you on the air. ThinkTech, Twitter, totally interactive. Interact with us on ThinkTech. I'm Jay Fidel of ThinkTech, and I approve this message. If you approve of it, or if it piques your interest in any way, take a look and check us out on thinktechhawaii.com, youtube.com, or ThinkTech High, and we'll be there for you. ThinkTech Hawaii. We'll see you soon.